very, very warm welcome wherever you are around the world. Welcome to the London Buddhist Centre. Welcome to our Dharma Night Monday class. My name is Manjusiha. I'm on the class team. And as I was saying earlier, I'm here with Alexandra and Subhadramati, who are behind the scenes, making sure that the broadcast works well. So that's great.
We just have a little suggestion, because the reflection from your screen is reflected towards your glasses, so people can't really see your eyes. So we wonder if we could just turn the light down, maybe on your screen. Do you think?
Okay.
It's okay.
Yes. That particular thing is beyond me, I think. So I hope you can. Hope we can sort of work with the lights on the screen. Maybe if I angle my head in a particular way, it will be okay. I mean, we are sort of constantly learning and evolving our sort of online classes, and this is something I think we'll learn for next time. Yeah. So I'm just going to say a bit about the evening. So the structure of the evening. So what we'll do shortly is we'll meditate together. And we'll do a period of the Metabolic together, which I'll lead us through. Then I'm going to we'll just give a short Dharma talk. So I'm going to talk about the Buddha. So what we're doing at this stage at the London Buddhist Centre is we're preparing for Buddha Day. So Buddha Day is the festival where we mark the enlightenment of the Buddha, and we celebrate the enlightenment of the Buddha. And that happens on the full moon day in May, which actually this year is a week on Thursday. And we are going to, we're going to celebrate the whole of next week. So I'll say a bit more about that. We've got a 7-day program leading up to Buddha Day, which we'll actually celebrate, I think, on Sunday in the traditional fashion here at the London Buddhist Centre. So mainly I'm going to talk about the Buddha this evening. I mean, one way of just sort of introducing that a little bit more. So you could say there's 3 great images in the Dharma life, in the spiritual life of Buddhism, and we've been talking about 2 of those images really over the last few weeks. So Kusalasara and Subhadramati a few weeks ago were talking about the wheel of life. So that's a symbol, an image of, you could say, mundane existence. And then last week, Yanavacha was basically talking about how we get off the wheel of life. So how we alleviate or completely transcend our suffering. So really he was talking about the spiral. So what I'm going to talk about this week is what it looks like at the end of the spiral. So what it means to be a Buddha. And what I'm going to do is, particularly, I'm going to talk about a sutta, so a scripture from the early tradition of Buddhism, and it's got a very famous and beautiful line that the Buddha tells to a man called Vakali, and the line is, "One who sees the Dharma sees the Buddha," and he also says, "One who sees the Buddha sees the Dharma." Really beautiful line, and there's so much in that line. So I'm just going to, after the meditation, I'll tell the story of Vakali, and then I'm going to say a few words about that, and in a way, some of my reflections on that. I think particularly at this time, the way that we're living at this time, how can this teaching help us? Just to say, there will, as always, be a chance for questions. I hope you'll start writing questions, well, now really, but certainly when I'm talking and giving the short Dharma talk, I hope you'll write questions, because I think questions for Dharma talks are a real gift. Actually, they can really help us understand more fully the teaching. And for me personally, I find it much easier responding to questions than sitting here, particularly in front of the camera, trying to explain the Dharma. I hope I'll do a reasonable job at that as well. But certainly the questions will be helpful as we go through the evening. Okay, so now I will say a few words more about the meditation. So, well, we'll do the Metabhavana practice. We'll do a 3-stage Metabhavana practice, which I will lead us through. The 3 stages are that we'll do metta for ourselves. As always, we start with ourselves and cultivate well-wishing for ourselves. And then we'll bring to mind a good friend, and then we'll expand our metta to take in all beings. So I will lead us through that as we go through. So if there's nothing else I need to say at this point, I'm checking with Subhadramati and Alexandra. I don't think I've forgotten anything. What I suggest we do is we prepare for our meditation. So wherever you're sitting, just make yourself comfortable. So on the sofa or on your meditation cushion or on the chair.
I try to move it to the side.
Okay, thank you. We're just going to make one small adjustment. Thanks, Alexandra. So I hope you can see. Hope you can see my eyes better, and I can look more directly at the camera as well. Okay. So while Alexandra is making adjustment, let's prepare ourselves for our meditation. So as always, just make sure you're comfortable and you can have a reasonably upright posture. We're going to dim the lights shortly in the shrine room here. Can be good, as always, to have something to rest your hands upon. So just taking the time to really set yourselves up well for what will be a short period of meditation. So we'll sit for around 10 minutes, and I'll lead us through. And I'll start by just leading us through a body awareness, so a body scan. So when you're ready, just closing your eyes. And you might want to take just a few deeper breaths just to help you to settle more fully into the meditation posture. So the best way to take deeper breaths is to extend the out breath. So clearing the lungs on the out breath, and then just allowing the in breath to flow back in naturally. So perhaps just taking 2 or 3 deeper breaths. And on the out breath, just allow yourself to be more and more fully supported by the chair beneath you, by the support beneath you. So letting go into the earth beneath you. And then just seeing what you can feel of the sensations in the feet. So the feet might be in contact with the ground, in contact with your clothes. Just seeing what you can feel of the sensations of contact. You may be able to feel sensations inside the feet, tingling or heat or cold. Trying to stay with the actual direct experience of the sensations rather than an idea of the experience. Seeing what you can feel now of your legs, sensations of contact in the legs. As always, just checking that you're not holding on in the legs. So allowing yourself to be even more fully supported on the chair or the cushion beneath you. Then the upper half of the body, upright but relaxed. So the spine rising up in its natural curves. Crown of the head moving up towards the ceiling. Just checking again if you're holding on anywhere in the body. So allowing the belly to be soft. Allowing the face to be soft. Not holding on in the jaw. Allowing the hands to be soft. Now just seeing if you can feel any sensations in the heart center inside the chest. See if you can feel any sensations there. And we'll go into 3-stage Metabolic practice. So as always, we start with cultivating well-wishing, loving kindness for ourselves. So one way of approaching this is from a sense of metta being our natural disposition. We naturally cherish ourselves. We feed ourselves. We clothe ourselves. We naturally want to be well. So just dwelling upon the natural well-wishing that we feel for ourselves. Basic sense of wanting to be well, wanting to be happy, and to avoid suffering. And if the mind drifts off, then we can just notice that with kindness. We can come back to the heart center inside the chest. We come back to a sense of well-wishing for ourselves. Natural sense of well-wishing. Staying grounded in the body. Staying in contact with sensations. Tuning into our natural sense of well-wishing for ourselves. And then in the second stage of the practice, we bring to mind a good friend. So many of us are unable to see our good friends at the moment, except online. Very lovely bringing them to mind in this practice, bringing to mind a good friend and wishing them well. Just like us, they want to be well. They naturally cherish themselves. So we bring them to mind with metta, with loving kindness. May they be well. May they be free from suffering. May they develop and grow. As always, staying connected to the sensations of the body, particularly if our mind drifts off. Coming back to the heart center inside the chest, wishing our friend well. And then in the final stage of this short practice, we cultivate metta, we cultivate universal loving kindness for all beings. So perhaps we bring to mind someone we don't know very well. We bring to mind a difficult person. You just see how many people, how many beings we can bring into the field of metta that we have been cultivating. People in whatever state of suffering or well-being. Anxiety, whatever state we can imagine people to be in, whatever state people are in, we wish them well. Just like us, they want to be well. They naturally cherish themselves. So we cultivate well-wishing. Bringing in more and more people into the field of our metta. May they be well. And then we just let go of any effort we've been making in the meditation. We just sit still for a few moments to absorb the effects of the practice. And then, when you're ready, opening your eyes, coming out of the meditation. So lovely meditating with you. I've been really appreciating sitting together, and I've been surprised that we can sit together actually at this time. But it really does feel like we are practicing together when we sit like that. So very good to do that.
There's 108 of us.
108 of us. Well, that is a very auspicious number, of course. So very warm welcome, particularly if you've just joined us as well. So. Yeah, great to have you on the live stream. So my name's Manjusiha, just to say again, for those who've joined me, I'm part of the Dharma team. I'm here with Subhadramati and Alexandra, who are behind the scenes looking after the tech. And I hope the my glasses effect is better now as well. There was complaints that people couldn't see my eyes, so I hope you can see my eyes okay now. So yeah, I'm just going to talk some Dharma for 20 minutes. So just a very brief Dharma talk. And as I was saying before, please do put questions in the comments box, and hopefully I can get through at least some of those questions by the end of the evening. So yeah, mainly this evening, what I wanted to do was to evoke the Buddha. So I was saying at the start, we are moving towards Buddha Day, so this day that's celebrated all around the Buddhist world. It's a day, of course, that marks the Buddha's enlightenment. So it's the most important festival day in the Buddhist calendar, and it happens on the full moon day in May. So that's a week on Thursday, and we're going to have a 7-day program next week in the build up to Buddha Day and around Buddha Day. So yeah, mainly I wanted to evoke the Buddha, so I've been looking at a sutta. So a sutta is literally a thread. You could say it's a scripture. So this is an early sutta, an early scripture from the Pali Canon, and it's called the Vakali Sutta, the Vakali Sutta. And it's basically quite short, and it tells the story of an encounter between the Venerable Vakali, who is ill, and the Buddha. And as so often, even though it's quite short, there's so much to explore within it. So I'm really just going to touch the surface of it. And basically what happens in this sutta, so the Kali sees the Buddha approaching, and he gets up and wants to welcome the Buddha, as you would do, I think, if you were encountering the Buddha. So he's a disciple of the Buddha. But the Buddha says to him, "Don't worry, Vakali. There are seats already here. I can sit down." The Buddha knows that Vakali is unwell, and he doesn't want to trouble Vakali. So basically, the whole encounter really consists of 3 questions that the Buddha asked Vakali. So I'm just going to go through those questions briefly. So the first question is very, very traditional one, which is, even in our culture, it's, "Are you well?" So the Buddha already knows that Vakali is unwell. But he's asking him, "Are you feeling better, Vakali? Have your symptoms improved?" And well, the sad news is that Vakali is not feeling better. If anything, his symptoms are worse. That's the response that Vakali gives to the first question. He actually says, I do not feel better. I'm not bearing up. I have severe pains, and they're getting worse, not better." So that's what the sutta says. That's what Vakali says. And the Buddha goes on to the next question, which is, "Have you any doubts, Vakali? Have you any reason for regret?" So even that transition from the first question to the second question, I think, is interesting. So Vakali's unwell, and the Buddha obviously is concerned about that and doesn't want to discomfort Vakali. But it's interesting that the Buddha immediately asks, basically I think he's asking, how is your Dharma life? How is your ethical life? Do you have any cause for regret? And again, it's very interesting what Vakali says. He says, "I have many doubts and I have many regrets." And so that's his truthful response to his teacher, to the master, the Buddha. And then the third question the Buddha asks is, "Have you anything to reproach yourself in terms of morals?" So basically, Vakali has said he has doubts and he has regrets. And the next question is, I think basically the Buddha is saying, "Do you have a clear conscience?" And basically Vakali says, "Yes, I have a clear conscience." So I just find this quite fascinating, this sort of combination of questions, because I think basically the Buddha is trying to ascertain how Vakali is, in terms of his health, but in terms of his Dharma life. And what the Buddha concludes from Vakali's answers is, he says, if you have nothing to reproach yourself about as regards morals, you must have some worry or scruple that is troubling you. So basically, the Buddha thinks that Vakali must have something that's niggling him, something that's on his mind, but it's not to do with his conscience somehow. So what I think the Buddha is saying, what I think Vakali is saying, is that, basically, and what Vakali actually goes on to say is, he just has missed seeing the Buddha. That's what is on his mind. So it's not to do with his ethical life, but he just says, "For a long time, Lord, I've wanted to set eyes on the Blessed One, but I've not had the strength in this body to come and see the Blessed One." So basically, that's what's on Vakali's mind, that he's wanting to see the Buddha. And the Buddha's response is quite surprising. He's quite strong in his response, and he says, "Enough, Vakali. What is there to see in this vile body?" So he's very strong, and it's quite interesting. So this is the Buddha talking to someone who's ill, and he's very strong actually, with Vakali. So what's going on? I just need to give a bit of the backstory of Vikali's friendship with the Buddha. It's really lovely, actually. So Vikali first saw the Buddha as a young man in Savatthi. So the Buddha was going on his alms round, and Vikali was just struck by the Buddha's physical beauty. He really was struck by how beautiful the Buddha looked, to the extent that that was the reason he decided to become a monk. So he became a monk because he just felt so attracted to the Buddha. And it's sort of understandable, you know, the Buddha must have been such a beautiful, radiant presence. And yeah, that's what actually attracted Vikali to the Sangha of monks. But when he joined the Sangha, he didn't study very much. He didn't meditate very much. All he wanted to do was look at the Buddha. He would spend his time trying to just get a glimpse of the Buddha and sort of stay around the Buddha. And the Buddha's very, very patient with him, but he knows that this is actually limiting Vikali's Dharma life. You know, he needs to go beyond this. So the next thing the Buddha says, coming back to the story, is basically it's a very famous Dharma line in the scriptures, which is one who sees the Dharma sees the Buddha. So one who sees the Dharma sees the Buddha. And he also says, one who sees the Buddha sees the Dharma. So basically what he's saying is you do not need to see my physical presence in order to deepen your practice. And I'm just going to conclude the story, and I hope you're asking questions about the story as we go through. I'm going to just bring a few reflections, my own reflections on, particularly at this time, of the meaning of the story and how I've been thinking about it. Before I do that, I'll just say a bit about how the story concludes as well. So this is in some of the other scriptures. Even with this strong teaching from the Buddha, one who sees the Dharma sees the Buddha, Vikali still doesn't really fully realize the teaching. So, and it's coming up to the rainy season, and what the Buddha does, again, is quite interesting. So you get the impression that Vikali's used to being on the rains retreat, so this 3-month retreat that happens during the rainy season. This time he sends Vikali back. He just says, you're not coming, Vikali, go back. And he goes off the Buddha goes off to Rajgir and sends Vikali back to Savatthi. And basically, Vikali gets quite down about this because he knows that he won't see the Buddha for 3 months. But and I mean, I'm just going to conclude. There's so much to say about this, but he gets so down that he almost thinks that, you know, what's the point of life really? And just at the moment when he's right at the sort of bottom and he's really sort of depressed at not seeing the Buddha thinks that he basically, the Buddha appears to him in a vision and gives him another teaching. And what the sutta says is Vikali, through his faith, basically manages to release. He manages to gain enlightenment. And it's an enlightenment that's through great faith in the Buddha, basically. So I've just given, I think, an outline of this story. And as I say, I'm going to conclude with just a few, just 3 points about a few reflections from the story at this time. So, I mean, one thing I think is really interesting about the story is, and this is something that one of my teachers has said. So Maitreya Bandhu, this is something he's been saying. He's been saying that it's like we're reverting to type at this time. So if we went into the lockdown with a predisposition to anxiety, we're probably feeling even more anxiety at this time than we did at the start. If we, So I think that's quite interesting. With Vikali, what his predisposition was towards desire, even towards lust for the Buddha. I mean, I think it's really lovely hearing about how he came into the Sangha, but that was his sort of disposition. The second point I want to make, and again, it's from Maitreya Bandhu, really, it's something I've been reflecting on a lot at this time. Something that Maitreya Bandhu has said to me is that our strengths are often quite close to our weaknesses. So what I find interesting in this story is that basically you could say the Kali's weakness is sort of physical desire or something like that, or lust. But his strength is great faith. He has this just lovely confidence in the Buddha. So that's actually his way of freedom. That's his way to freedom. For me, the one thing I've been thinking about is, and again, mainly what I'm doing here is I'm telling you what Maitreya Bandhu has told me. So I'm telling you my teacher's teaching as well. Feedback I've received from Maitreya Bandhu about my own strengths and weaknesses. So Maitreya Bandhu has said that communication is like my Achilles heel at a certain point, which I feel very, very grateful for. And it's something I've really reflected on, because I think hopefully it's also a strength of mine. And it's what I've been doing basically at this time is really trying to reflect on that as a means of deepening my practice. So I've been sitting, meditating, and then trying to think, what have I brought to this lockdown? What's my normal disposition, and what's the route out of that? What's the way of deepening my practice from that? And there's been, for me, it's been in the area of communication. For each one of us, it will be different. So yeah, those two things. We're sort of reverting to type, and also our strengths and weaknesses can be quite close to each other. And the final thing I'll say before hopefully receiving some questions is that, well, just about the third jewel, so the Sangha jewel. I've been talking about the Buddha, touching on the Buddha's life in this particular story, and also what he says about the Dharma. So seeing the Dharma is to see the Buddha, really. And yeah, the way I think that we can reflect on our qualities and our sort of weaknesses is by immersing ourselves in Sangha, is by connecting with our spiritual friends, connecting with our teachers. And of course, that's a great challenge at the moment to do that. We have to show great creativity and some sort of technical internet knowledge probably as well in order to do that. But I think without that, certainly for me, I would not have a perspective on myself that I have. I wouldn't be able to understand my own blind spots without, well, the great good fortune to have spiritual friends and teachers to learn from. So yeah, I've just galloped through the story and given just a few points of my own reflection, and I'm going to leave it there and hope that we can explore it more fully together through some of the questions that may be coming in. So I will ask Subhadramati if there are questions.
Yeah. So thank you. So so there's a question, directly relating to this. Anna's saying that she's heard that anger and wisdom can be quite close. And just if you can expand on that.
Yeah, I think that's a great question, Anna, and I think it's a great example, actually, isn't it? So one thing to say about anger in relation to wisdom, you could say that anger is energy that's trying to get at truth. I mean, there's some way into it, I think, that way. You're trying to break through something. You could say you're trying to break through ignorance to reality. So that's one way into that question, I think. But yeah, I think it's a good question and a good thing to explore. I think one of the dangers with the Dharma life is feeling like we should be a particular way, like that we shouldn't be feeling strong negative emotion like anger. And the danger with that is that we just bypass it, isn't it? That we sort of disown it, or even worse, we put it onto someone else. I mean, that's what I've been finding, say, with my reflection on being clear in communication, I find myself getting angry about other people who don't communicate well. And basically what I realize is this is a projection of my own frustration with myself. So I think it's really important to actually name what's there, isn't it? That's that starting point of what is actually there. What am I feeling? Obviously, we're trying to transform our negative emotions, but unless we name them, well, we can't transform them, I think. So yeah, I think it's a good example, and it's using the energy for the good, isn't it? It's virya, trying to transform that energy into wisdom. We need all the energy, and unless we name what's happening at the start, then we miss out on the energy of transformation. Yeah, so I think that's a very good example. Yeah.
Good, and Anna's very pleased with the response.
Very good, thank you. Good.
And then there was another question earlier on, maybe similar, but this time about craving. What about how do we use meditation to transform craving?
Yeah, again, I think it's very interesting, isn't it? Because you read the Four Noble Truths, and it can feel like craving is the root of all evil, it's something to be eradicated, which it is, and at the same time, well, it's a similar answer, I think, to Anna's question, that we need the energy behind it. I mean, one of the things I love, so the word craving is a translation of this word tanha or trishna, and it does get translated as craving, but the literal translation actually is thirst. It's a much more poetic word, tanha. So tanha, in a sense, is not the problem. The problem is that we try to quench our thirst with things that won't actually quench it. So again, I mean, going back to this story of Vakali, I think it's a good example again. He seems to have, he has desire, thirst for the physical body of the Buddha. You could say that's the impression you get. But what he manages to do eventually is to use, well, it basically rechannels the thirst into something that will quench it, which is, well, you can't really say what that is. It's a transcendence of the mundane and the usual ways we try to fix our experience. So yeah, I think for me the key for craving, or one way into it, is understanding this word thirst, and just trying to refine how we quench our thirst. Yeah. Get another very good example and question, I think. Yeah. Good.
And then there's well, you mentioned friends on the Sangha can help us.
Yeah.
But Tara saying, well, actually at the moment, we might be isolating and on our own. So if you can't turn to friends, what can you do to deepen your practice?
Yeah, well, in a way, we're all in quite different situations, aren't we? And in a way, so that I sort of hesitate sort of answering this question, because will be in very specific circumstances. So, I mean, maybe what I can say is just some of the things I'm doing. So, I mean, I have to say, before the lockdown, I was a bit of an online skeptic. I thought, well, how can you study together? How can you meditate together? And I've been very pleasantly surprised by the effect it can have. I did a seminar at the weekend with, online, and, mainly with other order members and with some non-order members as well. And I just felt incredibly moved by the end of it. I felt like I'd really sort of made new friends, actually. Part of it is online. There's there's a certain sort of intimacy that we are actually in each other's homes, and sort of, you know, that there is a sort of certain new sort of intimacy in that, I think. So yeah, in terms of connecting that way, I've been pleasantly surprised. I'm just talking about one of my favorite topics, which is myself, really. So I'm just talking about what I've been doing. Another thing I've been doing is I've been talking to a good friend of mine every day. So at the start of the lockdown, we just said, let's talk every day. We don't really have anything to say to each other. We don't really have any news. We're not really going out, but it's been really, really lovely. And definitely we've deepened our friendship that way as well. And also maybe the final thing is the end of the story, really, you could say, is so Vikali is far from the Buddha, but he brings the Buddha to mind. So you know, with things like the Metabhavana practice, that does have an effect as well. So if we are cultivating metta for our friends, or bringing to mind our teachers, that will have an effect. I think it has an effect on others as well, but it certainly has an effect on ourselves. So yeah, using the imagination to be with others, I think is very, very helpful as well. Yeah. So yeah.
Good. And then back to the thing about how you transform. So we've had how you transform anger, how we transform craving.
Yeah.
So Anne's asking, well, how about worry? How would you transform worry to something more positive and beneficial?
I'm less able to answer that question. I will need to think aloud on that one. I mean, I think partly because my disposition is probably to being too laid back about things rather than to worry. I mean, so I hesitate before giving any advice on that, I think. One thing to say, I think, though, actually, is one thing I think is helpful is to find ways that we can broaden our perspective somehow. You know, that part of our situation now is it can feel quite claustrophobic, can't it? You know, and you know, we can feel like very on our own. You know, I have to be careful about what I look at online. You know, part of well, it's the uncertainty of knowing how we sort of find our way out of this, isn't it? You know, the ground has been taken from beneath our feet, and it is a really anxious time, and it's a worrying time, and it's difficult to get our bearings. So apart from trying to come back to, you know, the sense of the body and direct experience, the other thing that I find helpful is finding ways of trying to broaden the context or something like that. So one example of that is, so someone talked about at the end of the Metabhavana, trying to see if we can cultivate a sense of spacious solidarity. So often, I think with the Metabhavana, well, it can be like a sort of humanism where there's nothing wrong with that, like cultivating well-wishing for ourselves and those around us, and even for the whole world and all beings. What I like to do actually is see if I can expand beyond that. So what we're trying to do in the Metabhavana is we're trying to cultivate universal loving kindness. So I like almost imagining the universe and not sort of getting into like a heady science fictional sort of mind state, but it just helps me to broaden my perspective on the current predicament that we're living in. So that, you know, again, I'm just talking about what I find helpful. I'm sure there are many other ways of doing that, just sort of broadening perspective. So maybe what I'm talking about is, you know, breadth and focus. You know, finding ways of moving between those and seeing whether that helps with you know, feelings of anxiety. And yeah, I mean, I just really wish anyone who's watching, really wish you well at this time. I just want to say, really sort of bearing you in mind. It is a worrying time in terms of health. It's a worrying time in terms of livelihood, economy, I just feel personally very, very grateful to have a Dharma life and to have a Sangha. I think that's something that we can rely on. Yeah. So. Okay. Maybe one final question. I'm keeping an eye on the time as well. Maybe just a final question if there is one before we close.
It is another one. I might need a little expansion on this question. It's from Jill, who's a regularly been joining us on these evenings, Jill Thomas, who says, is there a point in the story about feeling the Dharma for yourself? Is there a point in the story about feeling the Dharma for yourself? I'm just going to say something about it. I'm not entirely sure what the context is, Jill, but maybe what I'll say is, I can't remember which sutta this is from, Subhadramati or Alex may be able to help me on this, but there is a sutta that we often talk about, which is about trusting our own experience. So the Dharma as being something where we have to taste it for ourselves and we have to experience it. We don't take it on blind faith. So there is certainly, that's an important element of Dharma practice, isn't it? We have to make our practice our own. We have to make the Dharma our own. Part of that is actually, I think, following our interests and following up the teachings that we love actually as well. So that's definitely part of it, and that's, I think, part of the story. The other part of that is, though, listening to the wise. We have the epitome of wisdom in the Buddha here. So that's also part of it, I think. So I think we need both, don't we? We need to test it in our own experience. And I think also we need to give our teachers the benefit of the doubt, at least the benefit of the doubt. When I receive teachings from my teachers, Subhadramati, Maitreya, many teachers here, I take them very, very seriously, and I also test what they say. So I think it's both those elements. I don't know if I've answered that question that you're asking, Jill, or another question, but there's some thoughts there anyway. Yeah. So yeah, thank you. Thanks for the question, Jill. Thank you all for the questions. Very, very good questions, and helpful to go into for me, and I hope for you all as well. Okay. Everyone's saying thank you for your responses.
Thank you. Thank
and
you.
And it's the Kalama Sutta, by the way.
Thank you. There we go. Fantastic. Brilliant. There we go. The Kalama Sutta. Yeah, of course. Okay, so we have just a few minutes left. And I'll just finish with a couple of things. So firstly, I just want to say, do carry on joining us. So we're here every weekday, 7 o'clock every weekday. So please just do keep joining us, and do share these talks or this content with friends as well. It really is. It's lovely to be able to practice together in this way. The centre obviously is closed, financially we're okay, but obviously even for the centre, we need funds to sort of carry on going through this time. We don't know how long we'll be closed for. One of the things I find at the moment, sometimes I feel like I want to do something. So I feel like I'm at home most of the time. I go out for my regulation walk or run, and I know there's suffering going on all around me. I want to be able to contribute. And well, say one way to contribute is to give. So to give money for those who are able to. Some of us are in difficult financial situation. Others actually are in a reasonable financial situation, and it's just a really wonderful way to feel part of something and to make a contribution. It's something I've been doing this week. Just basically making some donations. So yeah, any donation you can make to the LBC will really help us. Will be much appreciated. There is a link in the YouTube comment box or somewhere there that you can click on. Really help us if you can do that, particularly if you're able to give regularly. So a monthly donation will really help us at this time to be able to continue doing these teachings and these sessions. So very much on a Dharma basis. So we're not asking for you to pay for these sessions. We give these sessions freely, and yeah, please do think about giving if you're able to. So thank you. And I just also want to say just a few words about our special program for next week, which I've just been hearing about over the last few days, and I'm very excited about. So what we have starting on the 4th of May, which I think is next Monday, we have something called 7 Steps to Enlightenment. So as I was saying, it's really to take to mark Buddha Day, which happens next week. So what we'll be doing is we'll be leading meditation in the morning. So that will be for people who already know the practices we teach, but also for complete newcomers. So if you think there's a friend or family member who might benefit from learning meditation, then next week is a very, very good time to do that. So in the mornings. And we'll also have a program every evening. And this program next week will be led by Subhadramati and Surya Gupta, Jnanavatra and Maitreya Bandhu. I mean, it's really fabulous team of Dharma teachers. So that's, 4th till the 10th of May. So that's all next week up till Sunday. Subhadramati's nodding, so hopefully I've covered everything there. So yeah, please do let your friends know about that as well. So I'm going to close this evening in the same way we've been doing on Dharma nights online. So I'm going to recite the transference of merit and self-surrender. So I will do that in call and response. And you probably will hear Subhadramati and Alex responding here in the shrine room. And yeah, please do feel free to join in from wherever you are as well. So again, we can just make ourselves comfortable again. Again, just connecting with the direct experience of the body, connection with the ground, with the support beneath us. So we'll recite the transference of merit and self-surrender. May the merit gained.
May the merit gained.
In my acting thus.
In my acting thus.
Go to the alleviation of the suffering of all beings.
Go to the alleviation of the suffering of all beings.
My personality throughout my existences.
My personality throughout my existences.
My possessions.
My possessions.
And my merit in all 3 ways.
And my merit in all 3 ways.
I give up without regard to myself.
I give up without regard to myself.
For the benefit of all beings.
For the benefit of all beings.
Just as the earth and other elements.
Just as the earth and other elements.
Are serviceable in many ways.
Are serviceable in many ways.
to the infinite number of beings,
to the infinite number of beings,
inhabiting limitless space.
inhabiting limitless space.
So may I become
So may I become
that which maintains all beings,
that which maintains all beings,
situated throughout space,
situated throughout space,
so long as all have not attained
so long as all have not attained
to peace.
to peace.
Lovely to see you all, and see you soon, I hope.